The brief caption summaries that highlight the indigenous Spanish and African roots of the Puerto Rican people are meant to establish the three main cultures that come together on the island as a result of a process of conquest and colonization. We start with the Taíno phase to introduce the indigenous roots of the Puerto Rican people, which most anthropologists and historians agree began around the year 1200 of the Christian era, almost 3 centuries before Columbus's arrival to the island. Then move on to the Spanish colonization process and the arrival of Black Africans brought to the island by the Spanish regime during the early years of the colonial period, in part to replace the declining indigenous labor. The first part of Poster 2 includes a few images meant to convey that this encounter of cultures and races was also filled with the violence of conquest, and that both the Taínos and enslaved Africans rebelled against their subjugation by the Spaniards, largely at the expense of their lives. The indigenous population, for instance, was practically decimated in the first century of Spanish colonization, and African slavery lasted until 1873, when it was finally abolished.
By the late 1860s, New York already was an important place of meeting for Cubans and Puerto Ricans in the struggle for independence against Spain. Now, after the Grito de Lares was defeated, many Puerto Ricans joined the Cuban forces, the Cuban uprising in fighting the Spaniards.
In 1889, during the heat and humidity of the wettest July on record, a newlywed couple arrived in New York City from Puerto Rico, bringing with them all the tools of his trade, the printing press. The bride, Inocencia Martinez Santaella, the groom, Sotero Figueroa, was 15 years older than she. And he was an ardent advocate of the island's independence, a very, very difficult preoccupation during this time when the colony was so severely suppressed.
Sotero Figueroa was a very important character in the development of the Puerto Rican community in the late 1890s. He was not only a member of the Sección Puerto Rico of the Cuban Revolutionary Party, but also was very active in putting out the newspaper Patria. Now, this is important because it would be the first organized effort by Puerto Ricans in New York to organize the revolution in Puerto Rico.
Immigrants among the city came from Puerto Rico and Cuba as well. Among them were Ramón Emeterio Betances, who of course had been the head of the revolutionary movement in Puerto Rico that began with El Grito de Lares, Eugenio María de Hostos, the intellectual and philosopher who advocated a pan-Caribbean union, independence for Puerto Rico, and also the education for women. The journalist and typographer, Pachín Marín, who edited the newspaper El Postillón. He and his brother Wenceslao would give their lives for the cause on the soil of Cuba during the Spanish-Cuban-American War. Sotero Figueroa called a meeting of Puerto Ricans in his home to launch a new organization. It was the Club Borinquen. He also joined a number of other clubs that were active in the city during this time. Los Independientes was one of them. This club was founded by José Martí, and it was in this club that the Cuban Revolutionary Party was launched. Sotero Figueroa also joined Las Dos Antillas, a club that was formed by a newly arrived immigrant, an Afro-Puerto Rican named Arturo Schomburg. He was to become known as the bibliophile and historian of the African experience in diaspora.